what I've seen of intimate relationships is that people were designed to hurt you. But at the same time that people were designed to hurt you, they were also designed to hold you.
When you say you forgive someone, you have to let them out of the prison of their past.
I wanted to actually ask, once a cheater, always a cheater? I think it's also making peace with the fact that you won't be able to reconcile with everyone, but you will always be able to reconcile at least with yourself.
That's good. Hello and welcome to the To My Sisters podcast. I'm Courtney.
And I'm Renee, and we are your online sisters and hosts of the To My Sisters podcast.
We are all about promoting the wellness, growth and development of a community of sisters around the world.
And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about rekindling lost love, getting back with your ex, mending broken friendships, forgiving your parents.
Ooh, juicy stuff.
It's giving reconciliation, especially because I was actually inspired by one of our previous episodes where we had talked about toxic friends. We had also talked about the reality of going through the motions of lifelong friendships. And the reality is sometimes the girlies actually have to reconcile with people that they have kicked out of their life.
For sure.
How do you do that? How do you know you're ready for that? And how do you do it in a way that is true to yourself?
Good stuff. Good stuff.
But before we get into all of that juiciness, we of course have some housekeeping announcements. Yay. And the big housekeeping announcement to ensure that this TMS house is swept is the live show.
Woo-hoo. Crazy stuff, man. We're going to be joined by some of our favorite sisters in the world to have some very, very juicy conversations and panel discussions about navigating womanhood through the ages and different stages and phases of life. And we're also going to be doing some fun stuff, think games, competitions, listening to music, all co-hosted by the fabulous Adela Afadi, Elaine Baby. So come and have a good night out at Hackney Empire. Literally one of the most iconic venues in London. Cannot believe that this is where we're doing this on a Friday night. Insane. But honestly, come and join us. The link is always in the description and in the show notes for you to grab your ticket because they're going hella fast.
Quickly.
And make sure that you do bring a sister, bring a friend, bring a brother, bring anyone who you feel like would enjoy the conversation and benefit from it.
But before we get into the meat and bones of the topic, we of course have a ding
dilemma.
Let us get into it. Hey ladies, hope all is well. I've always struggled with friendships from a young age, and it's not like I never try. But it seems that people don't try with me. I am clearly unwanted and unvalued in terms of friendships. I have spoken to my therapist about this, and she says I should focus on the friends that do show up. Well, the thing is, my friends that do show up are only online. I live in South Africa, and my friends live in Pretoria, where I moved to, Johannesburg, for uni. I have actively tried making friends. It's had its bad moments where I don't connect with the person. But other than that, I just feel unwanted, unseen, and not valued. It hurts so bad. Like, will I not be able to make any friends at all that make me feel valued? I've been the forgotten, nerdy, awkward black girl for years now. Help.
Oh, that's really sad.
It's very unfortunate.
And it's sad that like this is how you're kind of viewing your story as well. But obviously from life experiences, I can imagine that this is quite hurtful and quite a sad idea to reckon with, that like, oh, am I wanted? Am I loved? Am I cared for? It's good that you're in therapy. It's really great that you have a therapist to walk through this with. And it could just be that you're not appreciated where you are, right? And you need to find yourself in an environment and amongst people who will appreciate you and love you. And it could just be that, you know, the people who are around you immediately where you're currently living don't. And that's very, very sad to have to come to terms with. And like you said, if we're counting on what you said, if you put yourself out there and people just aren't reciprocating that kind of energy and care, girl, you've tried. And so maybe it's time to up and go somewhere else. You know, you said you moved for uni and you met people there. Maybe lean into that. See if you can relocate and find a place which makes you happy, because our environment and having people in our community and somewhat near us who actually make us feel happy, make us feel safe and feel like we actually have a social life is a huge part of our well-being. And there are many people who up and leave from an area, from a community, because they feel like they just don't belong or they're just not happy. They don't feel like they actually have that sense of a group and group belonging.
Yep.
And if it is that you have found those people that you click with, but they're in a different location, as much as it does entail quite complicated logistics, sometimes moving city or even moving country, you may actually want to think about that, moving and leaning into what's already working. And don't be afraid of that. There is still a way to start building a life where you do have, you know, a buzzing social life and people who you feel like are supporting you, even if you are in a place that's slightly out of your comfort zone or has been unfamiliar for the majority of your life. So for me personally, I would consider moving closer to the friends that I already have and just kind of waving goodbye to not waving goodbye, you can always return, but like what's keeping you where you are, right? If it is that you want to lean more into friendships, you may want to relocate and be closer to the people who you consider friends. And if you can't do that, I know that, you know, we talk about parasocial relationships all the time, but it could just be that your existing friendships need to be sustained leveraging the digital world, right? And so if you are maintaining your friendships by sending messages and doing FaceTimes and basically maintaining it virtually, there's also nothing wrong with that for a season as well. But you do need that in-person communion from time to time. And so think about how you're going to satisfy that need. It could also be that you need to start meeting new people as well. And take those labels off yourself. Just because you've been rejected by people in the past, it doesn't make you unlovable. It doesn't make you unwantable, if that's even a word. Somebody will appreciate you. Many people will appreciate you. It just might not be the people who you've met so far, unfortunately. But that's okay. Don't write off the whole of humanity. And more importantly, don't write off yourself because you feel like you've had negative experiences with a few people in the past. Because I always love this saying, you haven't met everyone that's going to love you yet. And so there's always hope for the future to find people who you click with. And it doesn't take a million people to like you, right? It just takes a few. And you found a few, but they're not close. And so maybe it's time to start branching out of the people you've been trying with who aren't reciprocating, you know, your advancements, and start finding new people, start finding new events that you could go to, or new, like you said, you met these people at college or university. It could be that you need to find a social setting to meet new people in. So find a hobby, find a group, whatever it is, that allows you to gather with other people and see what they're like, you know, if it's a religious organization, if it's just, you know, finding a social place to kind of meet people, then do that. But don't close your heart off to people, and don't walk around with these labels on yourself that like, it seems like you're unwanted, it seems like you're unloved. Like, no, you'll find people who love you. And I really hope that you love you. I really hope that you still are able to recognize, even through maybe rejection, that you are still amazing, right? And you value that, and you are able to pinpoint, this is what I love about me, and it's what people should appreciate about me. And if you keep those things at the forefront of your mind, you remind yourself that actually, just because somebody hasn't accepted me, it doesn't mean I'm unacceptable. It doesn't mean that I haven't got anything that's beautiful about me. You definitely do, and other people have recognized it. They're just not close by. So it's time for you to be quite directive in terms of, are you going to up and go where it is you are appreciated and where you can blossom and where you are loved, or are you just going to find new people who can offer you that love that you seek? And it's not bad that you seek it at all. It's now time for you to be intentional about finding it. That's what I'd say. How about you?
No, I love that. That was super comprehensive. I really love how you touched on, I hope you love you.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes we can turn our desire to be loved into like really seeking affirmation from other people, and also a lot of people pleasing.
Facts.
So yeah, I really love that you touched on that. I think the only thing that I would add there is just being clear on what the opposite feels like for you. So you mentioned that you feel unwanted, unloved, and undervalued. What does it look like for you in a friendship setting to feel loved, to feel wanted, to feel valued? Because I think it might even be lost in translation or communication. There may be people in your life that are willing to do that already, but they don't have a clear picture or understanding as to how you receive it. So how do you receive that love? How do you receive that affirmation that you are valued? It may be worth thinking about some of your online friendships that you mentioned that have been taken over pretty well, or even some of the folks that you still currently have around you. Maybe having a conversation with some of them and ask them, okay, so how do you show up in like friendships? Like, what are the ways in which you know, feel loved? How can I support you? And then equally being clear and articulating what it is that you need. Because oftentimes, again, lost in translation, but also a lot of people don't understand how to do that for people if they haven't said it. So make sure that you actually have some clarity around what it is that you need in friendships in order to provoke the more positive feelings, rather than kind of doubling down on the more negative feelings and the negative outcomes of some of the interactions you've already had. And yeah, I would definitely say, like, really think about some of the communities and the societies around you right now that you may be able to delve into. Some of them, like, I think we naturally gravitate to some of the things that we're interested in, so like hobbies or like communities, but also don't be afraid to experiment as well. Go to communities or societies that you may think, I'm a bit like shy to engage with, but I am actually like interested, or I would be out of my comfort zone joining this. I know you mentioned awkward, nerdy black girl. I definitely resonate. But sometimes you actually need to put yourself in a place of discomfort in order to get that comfort that you need, essentially. So don't be too afraid to kind of like push past that awkwardness. Obviously, take your time with it. I know that it's very difficult making friends, especially in this climate where a lot of us spend a lot of time online, and it's really difficult to actually find community gatherings. But where there are community gatherings, please try and prioritize maybe like once a week, even going out, or setting yourself an actual target of, I'm going to find a way to invite friendship into my life and invite community into my life, and making it a real intentional goal. But other than that, echoing Courtney, I really hope that you love yourself, girl, because trust me, you are not the first and certainly not the last person to feel this way. There are a lot of people that feel unwanted or unloved, or just don't feel like they found their people yet. And that is very, very normal, especially at the life stage that you're at as well, being in uni, being in this particular place. It's not a weird or like completely new thing. A lot of people have gone through it. I've gone through it. Courtney's definitely gone through it. Sometimes it is about experimenting and finding the community that is right for you, and like acknowledging the fact that that will take some time, and that's okay. You won't find, some people will find their people straight away. Some people will take a little bit more time to identify, these are my people. So sis, we are sending you lots and lots of love. But also, sisters in South Africa, we have a strong sorority of sisters in South Africa. So arise and shine. We would love to hear your thoughts, your comments, any kind of affirmation, any kind of love that you can send our sisters' way. Let her feel loved, especially in the comments. If there's any folks that we can connect you with as well that would be up for, you know, engaging, then please send us a message, and let's see how we can get you connected, sis. But sending you lots of love. We really praying that you find your people and find your community.
Amen to that. Fabuloso.
Moving into the main steez. Let's get into the skinny. We are talking about rekindling, love, reconciliation, going back. And I really wanted to touch on this topic because I've actually been seeing like fairly recently online. Obviously, we're in a culture where a lot of people cut people off. You know, if you come across toxicity, anyone can get it, whether it be a toxic ex, whether it be your parents, block your parents. And, you know, blocking friends, everybody can get blocked. Nobody is above blocking. However, part of life and part of maturing is understanding that people undergo transformation, and there may actually be opportunities for you to rekindle lost love, or there may be opportunities for you to get back with someone. And I think also thinking about one of the dilemmas that we answered quite a while ago, where obviously it didn't necessarily end with them rekindling, but there was that opportunity to rekindle. I would love to know your thoughts. First of all, why do people, especially like women in our generation, find it difficult to rekindle lost love?
I think it's like, as humans, one thing we really struggle with is forgiveness. In general, I think when you have to forgive someone, or kind of just be like, you hurt me, and the fact that you hurt me is actually very real, and that feeling hasn't necessarily disappeared, right? Or as much as I may not feel hurt right now, me forgiving you doesn't erase the fact that you hurt me in the past. So there's that reality of, oh, you hurt me, or you offended me, or there was something that obviously caused us to distance or break our friendship off in the first place. But now I have to kind of not act like that isn't there, but really overcome it, right? And not hold it against you, but also not hold it as a barrier in our friendship. And so with that, now I kind of have to act like, or not have to act, now I have to actually be okay And I think that can be very challenging for us because as human beings, naturally, we're inclined to hold grudges or at least just protect ourselves. And I'm not anti-protecting yourself, because I think it's really important to draw boundaries, especially when something, enters into that realm of being toxic, being unsafe, being harmful. But I think when something can be reconciled, as humans, it's just very challenging, because for us, it's like, nah, but you hurt me before. What stops you from doing it again? And also wanting to feel like you have won over on someone as well. And like, I can actually hold this against you. But when you reconcile, you kind of have to drop all of your weaponry and be like, I'm not going to use this against you, even though I really could. When you say you forgive someone, you have to let them out of the prison of their past. And it's very easy to want to keep people in that place and be like, no, this is who you are. This is what you are. And like you said, not accept the transformation that people naturally go through as they evolve and grow and glow. So I think that's a huge reason why we struggle with reconciliation. I think another one is we actually don't know how to say sorry. I think, I think with reconciliation, when you don't receive an apology, but you're expected to kind of just move forward, it can be really hard. And I think a lot of us are upset or are struggling because we haven't actually received the apologies we deserve, or people haven't heard the true pain that's in our hearts. And I also think this links to, as much as it's on the opposite end, we don't know how to argue well, in terms of like, I wouldn't even say argue, but like in expressing that you've been hurt, sometimes it's hard to know how to articulate that. And I know this one can be a bit techie because everyone is finding their ground with articulating their emotions and stuff. But I think with communication, trying to mature in the art of communication, you realize that like when you express yourself in a very like accusatory way, and it's like, oh, you did this, you always do this, and it's like, whoa, that person is now, as much as you may be in the right, and obviously you're hurt and you're pouring out those overwhelming emotions, sometimes a lot can be lost in translations when emotions are high. And so it's like somebody doesn't even know how to apologize. They immediately just go into the defensive. And so I think also creating spaces in our friendships, relationships, especially with our parents, which can be very tough, where we can actually express the way we feel and not feel like we're being belittled, but also like we are articulating the truth behind our feelings versus our accusations, if that makes sense. So like if I'm saying, oh, you did XYZ, it's not just that you did XYZ, oh, you're a bad person. It's more so you did XYZ and it really hurt me. Like, and it's that level of like transparency and vulnerability to be like, I don't think you're a bad person, but in this instance, you actually really hurt me, and it cut deep, and kind of showing those wounds and expressing that can be very hard, and it can feel very vulnerable. And then it kind of then puts, and we talked about this in our book, like it now puts the onus on the other person on how they're going to respond to your vulnerability. And if they don't respond well to that, reconciliation again becomes very, very hard, because it's like, I've exposed my heart and my true feelings to you, and it has not gone well. And it's like, if I welcome you back, it can feel like I'm forgiving you, but what change has actually happened? Or has there been a sensitivity to my feelings? And I think that also leans into like, on what's on the other side of reconciliation now. Is it going back to normal? Or is it knowing that the person who you're expressing yourself to will also be willing to do the work to make the change that's necessary in that relationship? And I think in cases with sometimes our parents, it can be, oh, I'm expressing my fears or I'm expressing my pains to you, but I don't even know if you're committed to the change or even hearing me out. And I think even with exes, it's like, do I just have to accept you? Or not even exes, but like romantic partners. It's like, okay, do I just have to accept that like this is how things are going to be, and for the sake of maintaining peace? And it's the same with friendships, right? For the sake of maintaining peace, I just have to be okay with what's going on. And it's like, no, I actually want change, but I don't know if you're going to change, and I can't force you to change, but I need this situation and this dynamic to change as well. So yeah, overall, reconciliation is just hard. It takes so many different factors, and like, I think everyone's heart posture has to be one of humility in the situation. And sometimes that can be hard, especially in the face of conflict. Because I feel like with forgiveness, the biggest way, like we often think about it is, oh, okay, just forgive someone and let it go and move on. But it's like, actually sometimes forgiveness has to happen through a bit of uncomfortable, but oftentimes healthy conflict.
Yeah.
That can just be challenging. But yeah, I've waffled on. How about you?
No, you have not waffled on. It felt like a tour into Courtney's mind. I was
I'll be
like,
trying sometimes. I
really enjoyed that.
Some fun stuff happening
It
up
was
there.
really great stuff, guys. I really enjoyed that. I was just seeing all the bolts whirring. I was like, oh my God, the electricity running through and all that. I enjoyed that. But no, I definitely agree with literally everything that you said. Forgiveness is so difficult.
Boy.
And I think for a lot of people, I can definitely resonate with this. The acknowledgement that somebody hurt you, first and foremost, can be such a big blocker. I think because sometimes we can be quite prideful, or sometimes like just the acknowledgement that somebody has hurt you can be perceived as a weakness in of itself, right? So why would you even be able or prepared to start thinking about reconciliation when to you, that hurt doesn't even exist, when it actually really does. It's just redirected, or it may be suppressed, or it may manifest in resentment towards the person over time. And I think a lot of us have a lot of hurt that we're not willing to surface or acknowledge. And I think oftentimes it's almost a coping mechanism with the fact that we won't get our sorry, or there are, you know, some instances where we've been hurt, but because we know that we may not get the acknowledgement that we've been hurt, or the closure or the sorry that we feel that we deserve, we actually suppress these emotions quite a lot, because we've lost hope that we'll be able to actually get that reconciliation. And I think you really touched on a really good point as well around the fact that many of us have seen patterns of quote unquote reconciliation, which look like passive acceptance of the situation as it is, and passive acceptance of this person,
or an abuse of grace,
or exactly abuse of grace, where we've seen maybe our sisters or our mothers or our friends like tolerate such poor and abusive situations, and basically seen them bled dry, that we've actually hardened our heart in response, right? We, in our efforts to be generational curse breakers, we end up not being able to reconcile with other people because we refuse to like put ourselves in the situations that we've seen other people. And it's such a shame, because life doesn't work that way, unfortunately. Facts. In trying to protect ourselves, we're also, again, putting up all of these shields because we don't want to be broken. And it's actually something, obviously we talk about our book all the time. You should buy it. It's actually pretty good.
It's a really good book.
But it reminds me of The Closed Friend, right? Where you put up, and just for context, for those that haven't read our book, we actually have friendship profiles. So the types of friends that you may be, some of the attributes that you may have if you're a particular friend. And one of our friendship profiles is the closed friend, the person who cuts off contact with people. They're very limited with their interactions with people. There's only a few people that have been able to penetrate the fortress that they've put up because they want to protect themselves. And I find that for a lot of people, they're not able to get reconciliation or facilitate reconciliation because they've closed themselves off, not just to reconciliation, but also the possibility of being hurt. They're like, I don't really want to be with nobody. I don't really want to create intimate relationships, because what I've seen of intimate relationships is that people were designed to hurt you. But at the same time that people were designed to hurt you, they were also designed to hold you. And in allowing people in, you allow, obviously the hurt is going to come, but you also actually need people to hold you. And reconciliation is part of that holding. There are people that you love dearly that are going to annoy you, piss you off, hurt you deeply, and like to the point where, you know, some of you listening are even still dealing with the hurt that you haven't actually articulated to them. And I also love your point around patience, right? Reconciliation takes a lot of time. And a lot of people won't be willing to do it, especially women, because it actually requires a lot of investment. A lot of investment. So those of you that may have gone to therapy, those of you that have talked it out with people around you, it actually requires a lot of investment. And knowing that it may take more sessions than you think it will to overcome. Definitely. So thinking about, for example, a cheating partner, it's not going to be for some of you, it's not going to be clicked my fingers and I've forgiven you and we can move on, because you may be dealing with PTSD. You may be dealing with negative emotions as a result of that break in trust. For some of you that may have really, really broken relationships with your parents, we already know how psychologically caregiving, neglect, or any kind of like abuse around caregiving can have such ramifications across space and time that it will take a long time to overcome it. Reconciliation, forgiveness often takes time. And I think that's where a lot of us have gone wrong previously, in thinking that it can be a snap judgment or a snap thing, and then, you know, we can move on.
That's good.
But actually touching on one of the points that you were talking about in terms of like overcoming reconciliation and just around transformation in general. So we were recently watching Love is Blind.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting. In fact, even as we're recording, the rest of Love is Blind for this season is coming out.
Okay.
Yeah, child. Maybe we need to bring back our analysis of the Love is Blind series.
Yeah, that would be good.
But there was one particular interaction where I believe Uche and what was the name of the girl that he was speaking? Yeah, them two were talking, and obviously in the pods they're getting to know each other. And again, for context, for those that don't watch Love is Blind or don't know where we're at, the concept is you get to know a person over a short amount of time, and based off of your interactions with them, decide to get married. But the catch is you don't actually see the person until after you've proposed. So the premise is, can we build a relationship without, the physical element? They get into conversation now, and my good sis reveals in conversation that she had cheated in her previous relationship. And it set the timeline ablaze, like once a cheater, always a cheater. And we often see on the TL or even in conversations around girls and their relationships with their exes, especially those that may have transgressed either through infidelity, a break of trust. But yeah, I wanted to actually ask, once a cheater, always a cheater?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. I think we need to be careful, because patterns of behavior are one thing. Like, as if you're a serial cheater, you have a lot to do in order to evolve and change, right? However, if we were all defined by the mistakes we've made in our past, we would all have some crazy titles over our head right now. Like, I think there are points we have to allow ourselves. Like I was saying, like, we can't keep people imprisoned in their past. You have to let them free when they decide, I no longer belong here, right? Like, I don't identify with this, or I've done the work to no longer feel like this is a part of my identity. And I think some of the last steps of transformation is not necessarily within you. It's actually people letting go of what they remembered you to be. And I think that that's the most challenging part, because, people don't often want to let go of the worst versions of us, especially when the worst versions of us were offensive in some way. Like, we actually did cause harm, or we actually weren't good, right? And so it takes time for people to let go. But one thing we do need to do is let go when somebody has changed. I don't think once a cheater, always a cheater, simply because whilst cheating is a really bad thing, and people can do it once, twice, and realize their wicked ways. Do you get what I mean? And I think for me, I've realized that, like, as much as these things are like, oh my gosh, how could you ever do that? When you really look at a situation, or you're in a very tempting place, as human beings, we should be able to empathize with the fact that temptation can be hard to fight. And as much as I'm not saying to tolerate serial cheating or somebody doing something and not recognizing how harmful it can be, I also think that there's a level of empathy we must have to let people know that they are not just what they've done in their past, especially if they themselves have recognized how incorrect it was and changed. Like in this case with Uche and Aaliyah, that was 2 years ago. And I think when you're in your 20s as well, or just generally when you're like young relatively, 2 years can make such a big difference in your mindset, in your approach to relationships, in your approach to people, right? Like if you think about how much you've evolved in the last 2 years, you're probably not the same person you were 2 years ago, especially if you've been intentional about your growth, especially if you've brought in and implemented strategies to really transform your mind and transform your approach to your life, like going to therapy or really being intentional about building community or just going on a self-development journey in general. 2 years can change you as a person completely. And so I think it's now for you to see, has this person truly changed? Like, let's be honest, has this person truly changed? But also if they have, allow them to be in this new identity. And I think that was what was so upsetting about what he did, and I understood why she was upset, and I understood why he was like, oh, okay, let's actually delve into this. But I think his condemning approach was what was terrible. It was like, oh, so that's who you are, like you said, once a cheater, always a cheater. And it's like, well, we could also call you deceptive. Especially if you watch more into the series, like we can call you deceptive, or we can call you a liar, or we can call you somebody who like withholds vital information. Like if we all are out here trying to crucify people based on the wrong things they've done, all of us would be hanging on a cross. Like that's not what we believe in. That's not what I believe in. That's not what we believe in personally. And so I think that like you have to let people be free once they've let you know, like, I'm no longer that person. And it can be hard, especially when you're the one. And this is another thing that annoyed me about their conversation. She didn't cheat on you. It wasn't you that she cheated on. And also she's not here confessing that like, oh, on all my partners, I used to cheat. Yeah. She was like, I wasn't sexually satisfied in my last relationship. I ended up cheating on my partner, didn't tell him for 3 months, then we broke up. It's been 2 years since then. And it's like, okay, that is a very messy situation, and let's talk about how we would approach you being sexually unsatisfied in our relationship. And instead of like thinking about how you could move forward, it was she stuck in her past. And I think that's very unfair, because as people we should be allowed to change. I think that's the whole idea and concept and hope behind redemption and the redemption story. We always say on this podcast, like, you are redeemable and your story is worth redeeming. But if people keep you shackled to who you used to be, you'll never experience the true freedom of redemption. And I feel like once a cheater, always a cheater basically says people are completely unredeemable from their mistakes. And I don't believe in that.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful, man. But yeah, no, I definitely agree. Like, first of all, you actually need to be repentant, because I think once a cheater, always a cheater is not true at all. But if you allow that to be true, it can be true. 100%. You know what I'm saying? Because I think some people wear that identity on their sleeve. Like, oh, I'm hopeless, I just cheat, or like I can't commit to anything, and allow that to become their identity. So I think there is that, right? The danger of allowing some of these popular phrases, or allowing a circumstance or a mistake or something that you've done that is bad to define your entire identity. And I think even in this situation, it's clear that sis had done some work. Yeah, she'd done some work. And the fact that she was very upfront and honest about the fact that she was the transgressor, right? Like, that story could have been told a million different ways, right? It could have been I cheated, but it was his fault because X, Y, Z. And she said, no. I wasn't good here, And I think it's important to take accountability. And I think it's also important to be repentant when you have transgressed, or when you have done something that is bad, morally corrupt, or bad, or has harmed someone, especially if it has caused harm to someone. And I think it's also important to understand the difference between giving somebody punishment and acknowledging that there will be consequences. Because I think even with folks that have cheated, or even in other situations, right, where you have caused harm, I think it's very, very tempting to want to dole out punishment because of the fact that you were harmed. And I'm not going to dictate what people should do. Obviously, you are well within your remit to react the way that you react. But I think there's a difference between punishment and consequences, in that punishment says, I'm going to keep you in that place. And consequences acknowledges that you can change, but it doesn't mean that there won't be things that happen as a result of what you've done. So for example, in the cheating example, it may be that I can forgive you. We can continue to have a cordial relationship, but the consequence is, because my trust was violated and one of my core values is fidelity, we're going to have to break 100%. Up. And that may not be the case for everyone. It may be that for some of you, yes, cheating was bad, but if you can show me that you're repentant and you have transformed and you have changed, then maybe this relationship with a bit of work can continue. I recently read the book by Kevin and Melissa Fredericks. They have a book on marriage, and there was a chapter where she was talking about like working on your marriage and thinking about like, how is it that people overcome things like infidelity or adultery, etc., whatever. And again, she couldn't say this is the blueprint for figuring this thing out, but there may be consequences for the actions that you have undertaken, and actually taking it with grace, as opposed to allowing yourself to really hold onto it, and hold it above the person as well, like hanging it over their head. Because as you said, all of us have been caught slipping. Facts. In a different way.
Also, most of us haven't been caught. And that's probably why, like, we're so quick to also fling out, like, no, you can never change. But it's like, no, you just haven't been caught. Like, if we knew everything you had done as a transgression and we labeled you by it, things would be hella different for some of y'all. But she, at least, like, she was very forthcoming with, this is what had happened. Like, this is what I had done. But a lot of people aren't forthcoming with it, right? Because they know oftentimes people are going to hold this against me. And so I think it's more so about, like, holding people to the things we know of them, but kind of hiding behind the fact that people don't know so much about us.
Exactly. This, it's presenting as holier than thou, and baby,
crazy.
You went home and you were
crazy stuff.
You were awful. Some of y'all have burner accounts where you're terrible people.
You know,
awful.
Don't do that.
You should stop. Actually, no, because some of you guys on the burner account, some of y'all are mean and rude, and you should stop. It's not good.
I think a lot of us just nowadays anyway just lack empathy. Like, we're struggling. And I think digitization and just the proliferation of the internet in general and how distant we can feel from humanity can just make us lack empathy in general, and, like, forget that there are real emotions, but also there is the human experience, and we are all experiencing it at the same time. And yet we sometimes just don't give the same grace, patience, and tenderness and care to other human beings because it's just hard to view them as human beings, right? It gives us the opportunity to show our, like, moral superiority and all of that. And it's like, try just thinking about how they must feel on the other side. But I think that's becoming more and more difficult to do.
Yep. Definitely agree. So we've talked a little bit about folks that have transgressed.
Why are you
folks
saying like that?
I don't know. It's giving. I'm on my steez. I'm ready to be. You know those people that's like, so I have a question for you. Those of you listening, I was there like a cat. You know them cats that
sitting like this for some reason.
Oh, you have to bring to
You look so uncomfortable.
You know, do you have like a thinking move, or like there's certain things that when you're thinking that you do?
Yeah, I chew on the inside of my mouth. Yeah,
I feel like for me
bad.
it's the that look. We've spoken a bit about folks that demonstrate like repentance and those that are, you know, keen to reconcile. How do you start the process of reconciliation, or is it worth starting the process of reconciliation with folks that are not repentant?
No.
Or folks that may not want to reconcile in the way that you envisaged? So I'm thinking more about like not just romantic partners, but also family. So many of us may have grievances with our family, but may feel invalidated by some of them as it pertains to our experiences, or challenged by them, right? Like, are you sure that this is the way that this happened? Or like, I'm actually not sorry. How do we pursue, first of all, should we pursue reconciliation with folks like this? And if so, how do we do it?
Reconciliation can't happen without some kind of repentance, or at least an agreement. And I think oftentimes when somebody isn't actually sorry, or they don't want to change from what it is they've been doing that's maybe harmful or upsetting, where are we going from here apart from to break this thing off, or to create some distance, or to just put in stricter boundaries, which can, you know, be uncomfortable to do, but it's far less uncomfortable, or it's far more comfortable than being hurt and harmed all the time, you know? So I think when it comes down to reconciling, you can't really kick it off without there being an understanding of the affliction, or an understanding of, or a real acknowledgement of the fact that, an offense has been created here. If you can't acknowledge that at the very least, then you're not even on the same page. You're trying to reconcile, that other person's just trying to move forward and move ahead. And you need to at least be on the same page. And I think this is where the element of agreement also comes in, because it's now like, okay, but where are we going? What's the aim? Do both of you even want to save this friendship or save this relationship? And I think in the case of our parents, it can be hard because, one, they don't want to even acknowledge that there's a problem.
Right.
But sometimes in the case of like romantic relationships, there's a lack of agreement as to what's the solution here, right? Like, what are we now both working towards? Is it keeping this relationship like this or making it healthier, staying together or being apart. And I think if you don't decide also what are we fighting for, you're both not fighting the same fight. You're really not. And you might just end up fighting each other because of that. And so even in friendship, like acknowledging, are we trying to save this friendship? And also then what does it look like for this friendship to be saved and for this friendship to be healthy, or for this friendship to now have been worked on and mended back to health? What does full health actually look like? And it certainly doesn't look like me behaving how I've behaved or you behaving how you've behaved as I've described it hurting me. Do you get what I mean? It doesn't look like you going back to your past offenses, and it doesn't look like me holding this in either. So now we have to choose to fight forward. And I think that's just the challenge of reconciliation, and why sometimes reconciliation, and most times reconciliation, is harder than letting go. Letting go can sometimes be the easy way out. Not necessarily to say it's not necessary, sorry, because sometimes it often is, and actually it's the best thing to do with a lot of toxic situations. But actually, when it comes down to our friendships, a lot of us are letting go of friendships and relationships in general easier than, or more flippantly than we should, because we know that reconciliation is going to be harder. It's what you were saying, like reconciliation actually takes layers of work. Like it takes constantly sometimes rehashing certain things. I remember when going through the rebuilding my relationship with my mom and having to have the same conversations over and over again almost every year, because it was like, you did this and I told you last year don't do that. Do you get what I mean?
See the receipts as per last year,
you know? And it's like, actually sometimes evolution on someone else's part actually takes time. Now if we are at least acknowledging that, oh, they're trying to make a change, we now have to sign up to being patient whilst that change is happening. And we can't force it, but we can enforce certain things, which is our boundaries, and letting people know, okay, if we're both still in agreement that we're trying to move in this direction of being in a healthy relationship, I am going to keep pulling up the fact that you're doing this thing wrong. And don't get annoyed and don't get frustrated, but remind yourself that we are moving in the right direction and we are doing this with similar effort. And I'm just going to let you know when you're slipping, and you should also be able to let me know when I'm slipping, because somebody should be able to say to you, maybe you're treating me too harshly, or you're being unforgiving in this situation, or maybe you still seem to be holding a grudge or being resentful towards me. And so the journey of reconciliation is hard. That's just to say the journey of reconciliation can be really hard, but it's worth it. I think a lot of us don't know true love and true friendship until it's been tested in a way, and this isn't to say fall in love with toxicity at all.
Go testing.
Like that's not to say that, but it is to say that, like, I think that the value and the strength of anything is not revealed until it's tested a little bit, you know? And so it's the same with relationships. I think that's just a principle of life that we learn. Like, even if we think about our own individual glowing and growing journeys, we realize that we wouldn't have seen how much we could shine if there wasn't a little bit of fire, you know, if there wasn't something that was pushing the goodness and the greatness out of us, which was uncomfortable, which was almost breaking us in some way. And so I think that level of pressure can really produce something beautiful. And it's the same for relationships, right? Pressure can produce something beautiful in relationship. And as long as you're both understanding that you do want to see the beauty that comes out on the other side and be a part of making that thing beautiful, you can fight through it. Like, there is nothing like human willpower and unity in this world. Like, as a force, unity is crazy. And the amount of things that it can birth, absolutely insane. But it takes genuine commitment from both parties. And so ascertain whether you're both willing. That
was beautiful. Gold refined through fire. You know what that made me think of though, in terms of pressure on the relationship? You know those people that come after like 5-10 years and then they post their partner and they're like, you put me so through hell. Nah. We've gone through it together.
Nah. But the thing is, I think the bit that makes that so egregious is like, do you know
how funny egregious is?
The thing that makes that so egregious is the pressure was only felt by one person.
Oh,
and I think in a relationship, if the pressure is imbalanced, that's when it's in a toxic place.
And when you are the perpetrator,
exactly,
because pressure doesn't always have to come within the relationship. It can be outside forces.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Even in the case of like parents, the relationship that you have with your parents, outside factors can really apply pressure. It may be financial constraints. It may be other kind of relational constraints. And acknowledging that sometimes the pressure, or sometimes the way that people behave in relationships to cause harm, is actually a direct response to the pressure that they're feeling outside. That is often really, really helpful in the facilitation process of reconciliation, because a lot of people just actually want to feel heard and acknowledged. That is at the crux of so many relationships. When you are broaching reconciliation, even with parties that are seemingly unrepentant, it may not be that they're unrepentant. It just may be that they don't feel acknowledged as well. They don't feel as though, you know, their burdens have also been equally acknowledged. So whilst you are able to kind of hold that harm, I think part of the reconciliation process that's often hard is being able to do the two at the same time, or at least being able to sequence it such that you feel comfortable kind of sharing, I was harmed here, but also understanding and acknowledging that maybe that person, this is not in all circumstances, mind you, but maybe that person, the reason that they have actually caused harm is because they too were harmed in some way.
But I think that also has to be a willingness to be vulnerable enough to say what your pressures are.
Oh yeah,
because then sometimes it's like, oh, okay, I did this because I was under pressure, and it's like,
what pressure?
I don't know that. Do you get what I mean? And you have to you have to actually be transparent about what it is you're going through, in order for someone to contextualize your behavior. Because some of us just look like we're bugging out, but it's like, no, you're going through something and you just haven't articulated it. So if you also want somebody to understand all, like, the full context of what reconciliation looks like, you have in order to reconcile, basically, you need to know the full context of what's going on. Like, what is our actual starting point? And if all parties are not transparent with feelings, but also external pressures, it can be hard, and it can still feel like there are smokes and mirrors in that process. It reminds me of something that Mike Todd says, which is like, God can't bless where you pretend to be. He can only bless you where you are. Right. And I think if you're not honest about exactly where you are, there is no way to really orient your direction. Do you get what I mean? Like, what does reconciliation even look like? We don't know, because we don't know where we're starting from. So you have to be honest about exactly where you are so that you can move forward from there, even within a relationship.
I think what's also hard about that, though, is that everyone has different pacing with that. So even in terms of like feeling comfortable to reveal, I found like in so many cases, especially after I'd done the work, I was kind of like, okay, let's be transparent now, or like, okay, like, let's be honest with each other. But it took me a while to also understand that it takes other people more time to be able to share that with you. And it may not necessarily be as a result of you yourself or something that you've done, but it's actually something that they need to deal with in terms of being able to articulate the things that they're going through, some of their pressures, or even the power dynamic or imbalance they've imagined in their head. So I'm even thinking the pressure on like parents. I'm thinking about like not just my parents, but also parents now that like I'm around increasingly because of my friends. And it's like, in their minds, they see their children as children. And it's like, it takes a long time for them to get to the point, even when their children become adults, to see them as actual human beings, devoid of the whole, I'm here to take care of you. And I think for a lot of parents, it can be tricky to move past that. And it's only like in the past few years and having conversations with both my parents that we've also been able to strike a friendship where they feel like comfortable enough to like share things that maybe like 5 years ago or 6, 7, whenever, felt uncomfortable because they felt limited by that duty of care. So I think it's also being patient with the pacing in which people reveal that honesty and that the pressures that may be adding fire to their lives at that particular moment. And I think also another thing that I was thinking of was the fact that sometimes reconciliation will have to be a solo ordeal, in that we often think of reconciliation as just reconciliation with another person. But oftentimes, especially where you are engaging with somebody that may be unrepentant or not willing to like pursue things with you, there's an internal reconciliation with yourself that also needs to undertake, because you can't be, as much as you may be holding that person in a prison, you're also in jail with them.
Yeah.
And sometimes you actually need to release yourself from that bondage and say, you know what, I'm not even forgiving you for you, because I know that we're not coming back together. Like, that relationship done and dusted. But I'm forgiving you because I too want to be free, and I too
reconcile with the fact.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I too actually have to have freedom, and I don't want this to be weighing me down. I don't want this to be causing hurt or harm either to myself or other people around me as a result. And I think it's also making peace with the fact that you won't be able to reconcile with everyone, but you will always be able to reconcile at least with yourself.
That's good.
If you find yourself in a situation where you're actually with someone that doesn't want to reconcile with you, you actually need to do the work of reconciling with yourself.
It's a good one.
It is so necessary. So then, thinking about reconciliation, rekindling lost love, all of that stuff, what does that process look like? Obviously, it's going to be different, but I guess more high level. What are some of the things that people that are actually interested in reconciliation, what's the approach? How do we go about like rekindling an ex? Like, do we slide into the DM? How do we rekindle the friendship? Do we like unblock the number? Like, how do we go about this?
I think you have to be at least able to sit down and have a conversation like in person about what it is that you're feeling. So there has to be some way to reach that person. And this is why I'm not a promoter of like burning bridges, because sometimes you burn a bridge prematurely and then you realize actually we need to reconcile in some way, or I would like to explore, and it's like, nah, there's no going back now. And so at least having that, there can be a cool off period where it's like, you know what, maybe I do need distance before I can even entertain reconciliation, just to cool off a bit. Because I think reconciliation can be really hard when anger and pain is fresh. And so allow yourself to take that time if you need it. But then having a really transparent and honest conversation that says, this is what has happened. This is how I'm feeling. And a heavy emphasis on the feeling as well, because I think the way we interpret people's actions is what hurts us. It's not always just the action, because sometimes it's not, especially if things like this have built up over time. Sometimes it's not, oh, you did this and this directly hurt me in this way. It's more like, actually, through this pattern of behavior, I am interpreting it as this is how you see me, or this is how you see our relationship, and I don't like that. And putting it that way allows you to actually reveal your truth, vulnerability. Similarly, reading having read the Marriage Be Hard book by Kevin and Melissa Fredericks, they talk about how like there was a situation where something was really important to Kevin, and Melissa was like, I'm not going. And her I'm not going was not, I'm not going because she said, I'm not going because I feel sick. And he was like, what, you were feeling great a couple minutes ago, what the heck is going on? And she's like, actually, I'm not going because I feel sick wasn't I'm not going because I feel sick. It was, you did something to me which really, really hurt me a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago, or a year ago. And now I'm using this as an opportunity to get back at you, because when you did that thing to me, which was very similar to what she did to him, not show up to an event last minute, I interpreted it as, what I have going on is not important to you. And if you don't have that level of transparency to say, it's not necessarily what you said or what you did, it's how it made me feel, because I interpreted it as this, people won't actually know the deepness of the affliction you're feeling. Do you get what I mean? Because a lot of us, we do things in a reactionary way, right? Like, you say this, I move on. Do you get what I mean? But for us, the way we internalize what's happened in that interaction is, whoa, that was like, you basically stabbed me in the back, you know? And if we don't make it clear, it can go over someone's head that they've even hurt us. Like, oh, I said that, okay, I didn't realize that would hurt you that deep. But if you don't articulate that, actually, no, this cut me deep because of this person won't really know the weight behind those reactions or those words that they say. And so I think you also need to come into that conversation willing to be very vulnerable, and like I said, not accusatory, like you do this and pointing the finger. It's more so, actually, this is how this makes me feel, and this is how I've been interpreting things. And I also think that helps, especially if you're prone to overthinking, that helps that person walk you off the edge and just be like, when I say this, I do not mean this, or when I do this, I do not mean this. But then also being able to like get to know you a bit better, which is I may need to rephrase the way I say certain things, or I may need to adjust my behavior actually, because things that I don't think are offensive, you're clearly interpreting it as so, and I can actually change that. And so I think that leads to the next point, which is now you need to find what areas or what behaviors you need to change or you need to defend. And I do think when it comes to reconciliation, there can actually be some areas of defense, because sometimes there can be misinterpretation of behavior. And it allows you to, again, get to know the offending party maybe a bit better as well. And so you have to be open to knowing that like reconciliation doesn't always look like, oh, I'm sorry, let's move on. Do you know what I mean? Or I'm sorry, now I'm going to become exactly what you need me to be. That person also has their own feelings and their own motivations, and their own external pressures as well. And I think this conversation opens up the floor to hearing all of that. And it can then help you say like, oh, okay, maybe I've seen things wrong, or maybe I've been seeing everything right, and I'm still very much justified in how I feel, but I have more context to this now. And so, yeah, now you both need to see what direction are we moving in and how do we need to change in order to get there. If somebody's unwilling to engage in step one, which is the actual conversation, then like you said, reconcile with the fact that, okay, the fact is we're not going to reconcile, and I need to reconcile with that. Do you get what I mean? Or I need to reconcile with the fact that this relationship, as much as we aren't going to cut each other off, it may never be the same as how it was. And now I need to grieve it a little bit and allow yourself to now go through that experience of grief and loss, which can be the most heartbreaking part, but I think even knowing that like heartbreak is a season, just as reconciliation has so many different steps and can be described as a season of healing and transformation, there is also a season of heartbreak that can be birthed out of not reconciling with someone, and you have to allow yourself that time as well to grieve. And then I think past that, especially if you do decide, okay, me and you are going to continue to walk forward, boy, strap yourself in for the ride, because it can be hard. Like, it's a lot of back and forth, especially with not stubborn people, but all of us have our habits and we have our ways, and it can be hard to just come out of those things, right? Like the way you speak to someone, or the volume you speak to someone, or the way you react to somebody doing something. It can be hard to unlearn that, but you can still be committed to that process of unlearning. But the other person needs to be patient with the fact that, oh, you've had this habit for 20 years, 26 years or whatever. Now I need to wait for you to unlearn it. And it might take another 6 years. And it may be annoying because it's like, I want you to change immediately. But I think what we need to count on is more so the effort to change, and the genuity behind that. I think another thing that we need to really value in friendship is somebody's genuine effort, and we need to learn to discern that, right? Like, not when someone's playing you along, oh, okay, yeah, I'll change, whatever, I'll do that, but more so, actually, no, I'm genuinely trying. Like, I'm genuinely trying, and I might be getting it wrong, but I'm genuinely trying. And can you value that at least for now till I change? Yeah.
It's like riding a bike, learning how to ride a bike again, right? Especially the older you get, the more ingrained certain habits and behaviors become. So it actually becomes really difficult to go against the grain, and you actually have to do some level of reprogramming. That in of itself is huge. And the fact that somebody is committed to that speaks volumes to the fact that they actually value this relationship. But yeah, no, absolutely love that. Absolutely love that. I think what's really important when you are in the business of rekindling or reconciliation or just reconnecting is setting your intentions from the jump. Like, I think I love what you were saying about interpretation, because a lot of pain, harm, a lot of things that happen that cause rifts in relationship actually come due to miscommunication, and where you may have said one thing and the other person has interpreted it in this particular way, can just cause so much unnecessary strife later down the line. Right. So actually setting intentions for your reconciliation. Are we reconciling because we actually want a relationship with each other? Because I think sometimes we can hasten to the, forgive and forget and move on. And it's like, okay, we want to move on, but are we clear on what that moving on looks like for both parties? Like, are we happy with that? And reconciliation doesn't always look like, okay, we were besties once, we have to be best friends again. Maybe it looks like we're actually really good acquaintances now. Yeah, we were best friends and then we broke up and then came back together, and the consequence of that is that level of closeness might actually take some time to rebuild. But you know what? We can be acquaintances in the meantime and build that back up. Or similarly, as you were saying around grieving relationships, maybe you broke up with this guy and it took a while for you to come around to forgiving him and feeling as though you could, you know, feel safe with this person. And it may not be that you get into a relationship straight away. It might be that you're friends for a period of time to just build back up that trust before you get into a relationship. And rather than focusing on building that relationship back to what it was, actually deciding to forge something new. Because I think there's so much pressure when we reconcile to basically just reproduce what a relationship once was. And sadly, for the most part, you can't go back. Like, you can't recreate it in its entirety. There is something that may have died in that season, which means at least you get to birth something new in this season. So really focusing on the new as opposed to recreating the past and trying to get back to what we once were. I think of like a lot of marriages, like I'm not a marriage counselor at all, but I'm not even married. Take this with a pinch of salt. Don't subscribe to anything by me concerning marriage. But having spoken to a lot of folks that I know that are married, especially those that have been married for a long time, it is really understanding that each season births something new in everybody. And the commitment isn't to simply maintaining the image of what currently is. It's about committing to them in every single season. So committing to the new demands, committing to the new pressures, committing to the new manifestations of this person. And it's not always going to look like a progression. Sometimes it actually looks like a regret. Sometimes it actually looks like a regression. And how do you deal with that when, in your mind, relationships should only go forward and not backwards? Like, how do you deal with it when these pressures come and it breaks you or breaks the person so much so that they cause harm to you? How do you deal with it when you had this like phenomenal image of this person, but you caught them on their off day, they said something and it broke your heart to pieces? Like, how do you do these things? It's very much about understanding that people change, things change, but the commitment isn't necessarily to that person in that season. The commitment is to that person across all seasons, and a commitment to birthing something new in these seasons with them too.
That's good.
And pacing, take your time. It's okay. It hurt you and it cut deep. Like even that, like sitting with the fact that this thing or this like broken relationship or whatever has happened in the past has actually hurt you. That's okay, you know. Like, we don't have to. I think there's so much pressure to start the healing journey, heal. And yes, instantaneous healing is a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing. But for many people, it's a luxury. For many people, they don't even have the necessary time in a particular like time period to really heal, right? To really focus on, you know, getting better. You may have work commitments. You may have certain things that require you to show up, which means that you can't focus 24/7 on your healing. Take your time, pace it. It's okay. Deal with it step by step. Healing does, like, even when I think of, like, for example, depending on the seriousness of the affliction, when you break your arm, healing is not a one-day job. You got to set the bone in place. You have to, especially, for example, if you break your leg, in fact, set the bone in place. You have to wait for some things to strengthen before you start standing again. And then when you start standing again, you have to do some physiotherapy to feel comfortable. And even then, for some people, they never regain the like same way that they may have walked before. They may have like a limp, God, heaven forbid, but they may find themselves walking in a different like pace. They may find themselves using their body differently. And it's understanding that the healing journey is like that, right? You may have gone through this, and whilst things look different and you still have the scar, you're still able to walk again. You're still able to create something beautiful. So pace yourself a lot. Healing doesn't have to be an overnight job. There can be some elements that are quick in, you know, the decision and the intention to move towards positivity, the intention and decision to rebuild the relationship. But the actual grafting, the building of that trust, the building of that bond may take some time, and that's actually okay.
It's very normal.
Reconciliation, rekindling lost love. I guess to end very, very quickly, Courts, have you ever had to go through the process of rekindling lost love?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like, I think it's a natural part of life. Like, sometimes love's lost, and it's hard. It's very painful. But I also think it forces a maturity out of you. And also, it, like I said, like that pressure can produce a more beautiful friendship as well. I think there's hope. And I think it's actually through losing love and having to rekindle it that I've learnt the most about myself and how I feel about myself and how I feel about other people, and what I am willing to fight for and how I fight. And that can be really hard. I think doing something it can just be really challenging, and it can be some of the most emotional times. But I think when you find something that's actually worth fighting for, you should fight for it. It can just be hard. And I think it's been some tough seasons, but it's been nice to be able to see what comes out of the other side.
Pressure makes diamonds.
Yeah, man.
I've definitely been, I've definitely been on both sides as well, right? Like where I've been harmed and had to reconcile, but also where I have done harm and have to reconcile. Because I think there's always the two sides to every story, or three sides. I think that's what Usher said. Word to Usher Raymond. But acknowledging, and I think we've said this in a past episode, that you are both the victim, but also can be the perpetrator in one fell swoop. Well, sisters, on that note, there may be some reconciliation that you may need to do this week. There may be somebody in your family, somebody dear that you need to reach out to. Or equally, it may just be internal reconciliation. What are the things that are still holding you bound? Some of the things that are still holding you hostage. Some of the things that you know have harmed you, but you haven't allowed to surface. The first step looks like that. Let them surface this week. There are some hurts that you may need to deal with, and that's okay. And that can be step one this week. What has hurt me, and what do I actually need to process? And how can I reconcile myself with myself? But as per usual, sisters, drop it like it is hot in the comments below. We would love to hear, have you been harmed? Well, most people have been harmed. Oh, well, yeah. More so, have you had to, after being harmed, start the process of reconciliation? What does that look like for you? What are some tips that you can share with the sisters that may be dealing with some hurt that they're not really quite ready to process yet, or don't really have the tools or equipment to start that journey? Support one another. You know, it's a community over here and we love each other. So share that wisdom and that knowledge. And of course, for more wisdom, knowledge, fun, community vibes, all of that good stuff, you can always follow us on all of our social media at To My Sisterhood on literally everything. Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. You already know the vibes. We are everywhere. And of course, if you want to follow our individual glowing and growing journeys, you can follow us individually on our pages. The lovely lady in the brown swirl, she's giving us au chocolat at CD Bartek. And of course, come and follow me over at Renee Kapuku.
For sure, and make sure you sign up to our mailing list so that we can send you love letters to your inbox. You already know the deal. For weekly glowing and growing tips, just pop your email into tomysisters.com rather, and follow at To My Sisterhood.
Do that.
Yeah, but head to tomysisters.com and sign up to our mailing list, and it's all good vibes over there, trust me. But yeah, like we said, sisters, link is in the description for tickets to our live show.
You better come.
And also, thank you so much for rocking with us. As always, we greatly appreciate you, and thank you for letting us be a part of your journey. So as always, keep glowing and growing.